Hi there, my name's Trent and I'm the Weft Wright. Welcome to my front porch today. Fall has fallen here in Western North Carolina. Now, some people say it's Fool's Fall and that we're going to have another big hot spell, but the leaves are falling off the tree. There's a chill in the air. It gets cool in the evenings. My favorite time of year. And that means that it's sweater weather. If you know, you know. So one of the things that I'm excited about once I get my new studio set up at my new house, which hopefully that is coming through very soon. I should be moving with just in a few weeks. But one of the things that I'm really excited about working in my studio is a sweater for myself. And so I want to get back on focusing on the knitting machine. And to do that, I reference a lot of videos online. There are a lot of really great machine knitters online, and I'll link some of them down below. But one thing that I love to reference is books. And I have been fortunate enough to find several vintage knitting machine books in thrift stores and secondhand shops, including a really great craft-focused secondhand store in Greensboro, North Carolina called Reconsidered Goods, which I highly recommend you check out if you're anywhere near Greensboro, North Carolina. And the books that I have collected are the Uncomplicated Knitting Machine, the Prolific Knitting Machine, Creative Machine Knitting, and then two books published by Brother, the River Techniques book and the Knitting Techniques book. I really like these books a lot. There are two that are my favorite, which I'll focus on in just a little bit. But there are still in production some knitting machine books, and there's some more recent ones that have been produced as well. But they can be a little bit pricey, and I have heard mixed reviews about some of them. I'm not going to mention any by name, but certainly they're made by competent people and they will help guide you. But these vintage books, I was able to buy all of these books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books for under $10. So it was a pretty amazing deal. And I highly recommend you seek out some of them. I'm going to mention specifically the titles and authors in just a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started doing that. All right, the first books I want to talk about are these two that are published by Brother themselves. My knitting machine is a Brother knitting machine from the 80s. I'm not exactly sure when these books were published. Let's see if we can find that info. I have found a lot of times in technical manuals they don't publish the publication date because, oh no, there it is right there, 1984. Sometimes they don't publish it because it means that they can use it for a longer period of time without it seeming dated, but they have in fact copyrighted it 1984. Both the Knitting Techniques book and the River Techniques books are a great supplement to the manual that comes with your machine. I particularly enjoy the River Techniques book, but even this regular techniques book for the upper bed or the knitting machine gives a lot of really great information. And some of it I haven't found anywhere else. So particularly information about sewing, steeking, and finishing your knits. Just some really beautiful information about blocking, about intarsia, and some information that you may not know if you're not familiar with making garments. It isn't necessarily necessary for me to have this information because I do things like buttons and snaps and hooks all the time. But for someone who's unfamiliar with it, that would be very helpful. Sewing in zippers into knits, which sewing zippers into knits can be a big challenge. So that's important information. And then in the back, I have a section called Advanced Techniques, and that's more things like picture knitting, what they call volume knitting, so that you're going to be knitting with really thick yarns. Anyway, really great reference, but my particular favorite out of these two books is the Ribber Technique book, it gives information that I've never seen anywhere, including my extensive knowledge of YouTube, but like automatically programmed in pin tuck patterns, which are really cool, and they give you all the information you need for those punch cards. My machine is digital, so I can transfer these punch cards in to be digital, but some really cool double bed punch card things. And then this, which I've never seen anywhere, and I'm very excited to try someday, is doing the multicolored stranded knitting with your Ribber. So this is essentially doing what looks like multicolored jacquard. So we've got 1, 2, 3 colors on the same row in one row of color work, which is something that I've never seen done on the Brother machines. I know some other vintage knitting machines do that, but this gives you full punch card instructions on how to accomplish this, which I find really interesting and would love to try someday. And then some beautiful cables done with the Ribber. Really just great information. These beautiful racking patterns and variations that aren't featured in other books that I've seen. Some really basic information on like increasing and decreasing when you're doing English rib, that kind of stuff that I haven't really seen any resources online featuring. Anyway, love this Ribber book. I haven't tried a lot of the things in it because I just got a Ribber this past year, but look forward to exploring it even more. All right, the next book I want to cover is The Uncomplicated Knitting Machine by Leslye Solomon. This was copyrighted in 1993, so it's a little later than the Brother books. I don't know that I would necessarily agree with this title. I think that the information here is pretty dense. Not that it is necessarily complicated, but it's a lot denser than some of the other books. But it does a really good job. If your main interest is doing fully fashioned sweaters, this is the book for you. It gives really great detail on how to fully fashion, how to calculate the different gauges and sizes for different people. It gives lots of diagrams of shaping, information on measuring, tension swatching, gives some basics about posture and ergonomics of using your knitting machines. It's a good book. I will say I don't reach for it as much as I reach for my other books because I don't do fully fashioned sweaters. And that seems odd because I think most people associate knitting a sweater with being fully fashioned, but most commercial sweaters, not all of them, really high-end sweaters are certainly fully fashioned, but most commercial sweaters are actually what knitters call steeked, but they're cut and sew. And so that's one of the reasons I love this book, The Prolific Knitting Machine by Cartwright-Jones. What is our publishing date here? This is by Interweave, interestingly enough, and this date is 1990. One of the things I love about this book is it features mainly cut and sew information. So prolific, of course, a lot of people confuse it with the word proficient, but prolific doesn't necessarily mean that you are really good and efficient at what you're doing, but it means that you can do a lot of it. And certainly fully fashioning a sweater takes a lot longer, and you have to worry about a lot more variables. And if you get it wrong, your sweater may be unusable. Whereas this book, with its absolutely adorable illustrations, all hand-drawn, mainly featuring animals, including a lot of very cute cats. Let me see if I can find an example of some of our cats. There we go. This is my cat knitting the ribbing by hand. This book just gives you such a wealth of information because if you end up knitting panels, and it is maybe more accurately called half fashioned because we are knitting panels to specific sizes, and we will do decreases for sleeves and things like that. But as far as neck holes and shoulder shaping, it's all done with a standard sewing machine with zigzag stitches. And I myself use a serger. I have sergers, so I tend to use a serger when I'm sewing my knits together, just because it's a little stretchier than the zigzag. But if you just have a standard sewing machine, the information in this book is very valuable, and it just has absolutely beautiful finishes. Like, look at this shawl collar um, that's folded as opposed to this shawl collar. Um, just really beautiful, detailed examples of how you accomplish this with cut and sew techniques. I love it. Um, really interesting ways of making buttonholes that I've never seen before, which combines machine knitting the button bands with some hand binding. Just really fascinating. Once again, really cute illustrations. Some kind of hedgehog or porcupine, I guess. I don't know. Um, just excellent information. And because you're not fully fashioning these things, you can make a lot of them a lot quicker. So I may get some flack from the knitting machine community, because certainly fully fashioned sweaters where you are decreasing and increasing and holding the shoulder to create the neckline and all that kind of stuff is very popular. But there are some knitting machine patterns, like racking patterns, and sometimes it would be very difficult with certain Fair Isle patterns, etc., to do fully fashioned necklines and shoulder shaping. So you have to do cut and sew anyway. And um, this book just gives you absolutely all the information you need. And on top of that, it also gives you some really great ideas like capes and long coats. So items beyond just sweaters. I think it covers hoodies and just really great information, caps and berets. I absolutely love this book. I would recommend it to anyone. Um, so once again, that's The Prolific Knitting Machine by Catherine Cartwright-Jones. And then the book that I reference most often, because let's be honest, most of the time I'm just playing on the knitting machine, coming up with various swatches that inspire me, is The Creative Knitting Machine by Sally Ann Elliott. And this book was published, let's see here, the copyright is 1989. So all these books are about the same era, the late 80s, early 90s. And this book essentially is just a series of swatches and how they achieved those swatches. So each section will have different areas, and it starts with the really simple things like stripes. Like, these are some interesting ways that you can do stripes. And then it'll move on to different raised textured patterns. These are like pin tuck style patterns, Fair Isle, different experiments with gauge, tuck patterns. Just fascinating. I really love all the textures and variety uh, patterns used by putting stitches in fold, different lace patterns. So much fun experimenting. And most of these can be done without an automatically patterning machine, though there are some Fair Isle patterns and stuff that it really does help to have a patterning machine. Look at that. That is gorgeous. This frill, and here are the instructions. So this is number 12. The frill, using A, cast on 40 stitches and knit 4 rows, set machine to hold and push center 10 to hold position, knit 4 rows, and then knit 2 rows overall. Continue and repeat this, and that's how you get the ruffle. Really, you have to translate written instructions, but the really cool sweaters and t-shirts and denim skirts and all kinds of things that you can be inspired from making these really interesting swatches and scaling them up. It's just really beautiful. I love this book a lot, just to be inspired, mainly for this swatch section that's at the front. And they do give you punch card examples at various points in the book. So if you do want to program your machine or create a punch card, they'll have those as well for you. Anyway, those are my favorite. I would say my two favorite were the ones I did at the end here, the prolific knitting machine and creative machine knitting. So there's a short overview of some of my favorite vintage knitting machine books. I have a few more, and I have a few knitting machine magazines. But a lot of the information in there is very time specific, right? It feels a little bit dated. These are the books that I think are still really applicable today, that you can take a lot of good, valuable information from. So what books do you use? Do you have knitting machine books? Have you collected knitting machine catalogs? I know that there were newsletters are really popular, and some people have those. Let me know in the comments if you have any of these books, or if you have any ones that you would recommend to people. I want the community to share and be aware, because you can find these books online used fairly reasonably, and also just keep an eye out at your secondhand shops like I do as well. That's it for today's video. Thank you very much for joining me. Please subscribe. It helps my channel out by spreading the word. I want to give back to YouTube because it has given so much to me. Check out my website, theweftright.com. Link down below if you want to sign up for my newsletter or read some of my blog posts. I really enjoy sharing all the knowledge that I've gained with everyone else and having a thriving community. So thank you. Happy knitting. Have a great fall.